All right. Good evening. Daf Tes Amud Beis. We are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines down. Eisvei Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. We had an argument with Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. We were discussing if the Kmitza has been taken from a Korban Mincha, and then following the Kmitza being taken, part of the Mincha, the rest of it that's left in the original container, gets lost. So we wanted to know if the offering is now acceptable to continue to be brought, right? This Rabbi Yochanan says that once you've already done the kmitza, so then you can continue forward with the service because it was coming from a proper mincha. And Reish Lakish says, nope. And once, even if after you take the kmitza, if you lose part of the original offering, you can no longer continue. So we are up to asking questions. So they ask a question on Reish Lakish as follows. Eisvei Rabbi Yochanan l'Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan asks Reish Lakish the following question. Ad shelo pirka nifros lachma. Right? We had this discussion of this brisa. Let's say before the bread is the and bazichin. Let's say before the frankincense containers on the shulchan are taken away, and nifros, some of the bread breaks. So halechem posel. So then the bread becomes invalid to eat. Can't eat that bread. Ve'ein makdir olav bazichin, and you don't burn the frankincense. Im mi shepirka nifras lachma. However, what happens if you've already done the kmitza, meaning you've taken that frankincense spoons off of the shulchan? At that point, halechem posel. If you break those loaves of bread, then the bread becomes invalid, can't eat it. However, the maktir alav esa bazichin, you can go ahead with the burning of the bazichin of hamein. You can go ahead and burn burn that frankincense. Now that is comparable to a regular kmitza of a regular korban. And what this is telling us is that once you've already taken those spoons off the table, what happens to the bread doesn't matter to the spoons. They're already off the table. So therefore, once you've taken that bread off, then the spoons can still be burned, even if the bread becomes invalid. From Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Elazar says, Lo pirka mamish, he takes it one step further. He says, you don't actually have to take everything off yet. Ella kevan shigiyaz mano lifarek, once it comes time to take it off, ve'afal pish lo pirka, even if you haven't. Why? Because we had said that that's unique about this offering, because the spoons, the frankincense in the spoons, is not mixed together with the rest of the mincha. Like most menachos, you have a bowl and you've got some flour in it and you've got the frankincense in the bowl too. So therefore, the kmitza, where's the kmitza? It's all mixed together. But when it comes to the shulchan, it's not all mixed together because you've got neat stacks of loaves on trays, and then you've got a couple of spoons inside cups. So it's like it's already been taken out. So therefore, even if the spoons are not removed, says Rabbi Elazar, it's as though they are. Now, that's your question against Reish Lakish, because Reish Lakish says that even after you've removed the spoons, if you have to remove the kmitza, if something happens to the rest of the mincha, it should be invalid. This seems to say once I've removed the spoons, if something happens to the lechem apanim, the lechem apanim becomes invalid, but the spoons remain valid. So Amar Lei, so he says, money, whose opinion is this? Rabbi Eliezer, this is Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, right? So, that he holds that even if any of the leftovers gets destroyed, so he holds you can go ahead and offer the rest of the offering. So therefore, he has a different opinion than the rest of us. Amar Lei, so Rabbi Yochanan says to Reish Lakish, Anna Amina Lach Mishnah Shlema. I'm telling you an entire brisa. Right, I showed you an entire brisa, the entire issue here. V'amart li'at Rabbi Eliezer. You are going to answer me that this is Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. So that doesn't make sense because Rabbi Eliezer, my irya nifras. If it was Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, then why would it be if the bread breaks? Why are we talking about if the bread breaks, then the bread is considered to be still acceptable? Afilu sarif avud nami machsh. According to Rabbi Eliezer, even if the bread was completely, if it wasn't broken, if it was completely burned up and destroyed, you don't need any of the mincha to be remaining. According to Rabbi Eliezer, he has a different shita altogether. This is specifically talking about a circumstance where it breaks, i.e. a piece which is similar to a piece missing. That's not Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. So ishtik. So Reish Lakish had no answer to that. That's a great point. So therefore, the Brisa seems to support Rabbi Yochanan's point of view. Now, V'amai Shasak. Why did Reish Lakish get quiet? There was a better answer he could have given. Le'malei, why didn't he answer Sibur Shani, that the shulchan is a community offering? Maybe it's different. Maybe that's where you can. Sometimes there are permissions given by community offerings that wouldn't be given by individual offerings.
What can you give for as a shulchan offering?
Sorry, what do you mean? What can you give as a shulchan offering?
Korban tzibur.
Right. The shulchan offering is the lechem apanim, right? The lechem apanim is the shulchan offering. So what is the What is the circle? So this is a community offering. That's why the spoons are not invalidated, even though I ruined the mincha. Maybe you could have answered that. And how do we see that when it comes to community offerings, we can be more lenient? That's because whole vishtari tuma legabai hu ishtari nami chaseros. For example, we know that if most of the community is tameh, right? We have a circumstance under which you can continue to bring community offerings, despite the fact that everyone's tameh. The kohen is tameh. The offering is you can bring it in any event. But that is a rule. That's a rule by community offerings, not individual offerings. An individual can't bring an offering while the individual is as tameh, right? Only a community offering. So the answer is Amar of Ada Barava, or Ada Barava says, I will explain to you why we can't say that, because Zoso Meres Hachisaron Kebal Mum Dami Vein Bal Mum Bitzibur. Because what is the invalidation of missing part of your mincha? If it was considered like tuma, you'd be right. You can overlook tuma when it comes to a korban tzibur, when it comes to a community offering. You know what missing part of your mincha is like? It's like having the animal have a mum, a blemish on it. And if we have a bal mum, we have a blemish, that's never acceptable, even in a circumstance where it's a community offering. So therefore, since that's what this is parallel to, even in a community offering, it wouldn't be acceptable. So therefore, that's why Reish Lakish didn't answer back Rabbi Yochanan. Hey, that's a community offer. Wouldn't have helped. Wouldn't have made a difference. Yosef Rav Papa v'kamer l'hoshmaita. So Rav Papa was sitting down and he said this argument. He was telling this argument back and forth that Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan argued about. Amalei Rav Yosef bar Shmai Rav Papa. So Rav Yosef bar Shmai says to Rav Papa, Mi lo askinon Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish b'minchas ha-omer. 1 second. What was the original argument between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish? They were arguing about the Korban HaOmer. That's the mincha they were dealing with. The Korban HaOmer is the one that you bring barley flour on the second day of Pesach, and it permits all the other flour. Well, that is the tzibur. That's the tzibur hi upligi. That is a community offering. That's the case that they argue in. Meaning, what were you going to say? You're going to say that it's different between a community offering and an individual offering? Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish are not even arguing in an individual offering. They're arguing about a community offering. Therefore, we wouldn't have said, hey, maybe it's acceptable by a community offering, because Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish were arguing about a community offering. So that's why he points that out. Amar of Malkio, we have remember of Malkio. If you recall, we had this Rav Malkio before. He had this famous arguments between him and Rav Malkiya, right? Rav Malkio and Rav Malkiya, and we had to figure out who said which part of the Machlokas. We've seen him before. Amar of Malkio. Rav Malkio says, Tani Chada. In one brisa we learned that it says by a mincha. That the whole pasuk is in Vayikra Beis, pasuk Beis. Ve'aviyah el bnei Aaron hakohanim. He's going to bring this offering, this mincha offering, to Aaron and the children of Aaron the kohanim. Ve'kamatz misham melokum. So this is the pasuk we've been talking about. Right, he's going to take his kmitza from there. We discussed what from there means. Right, from the location in the Azara we had talked about, from the location where he already took a previous kmitza, meaning that he can return it. That we had that discussion about what that word means. Now we're going to go on to the next words of the pasuk. Melo kumtso misalta umishamna al kol levonasa. The fill of his kemitza from its soles and from its oil, etc. Misalta, from its soles, from its fine flour. That's shim chasra kol shu psula. That is coming to tell me that if some of the offering is missing, then it's invalid. Mishamna, you're going to take from its oil, meaning that you have to have all the oil there. She'im chasra kol shehu pasal. That if it's missing any of that, it's no good. Now, V'tanya idach, we have another brisa. Another brisa says that the next pasuk, Perak Beis pasuk Gimel says, "V'hanoseres min hamincha," whatever's left over from the mincha, that belongs to Aaron and the Kohanim. So it says, "Prat lemincha shechasrahi." That is going to tell us that this is not the rule. Noseres min hamincha. You need the whole mincha. If the mincha is missing any portion, then the mincha is invalid. Right? Shechaser kumtza v'shelo hiktir milvonasa klum. So that is where we're talking about a mincha that means that only a mincha that was done properly can be consumed, and therefore we're going to exclude a mincha which the kmitza is less than it's supposed to be, or also you haven't taken any of the, you haven't done any of the levona, any of the frankincense together with it. So you have to, if the kmitza of those things are missing, so then even the levona is going to invalidate the kmitza. So we have learned from two different locations that a missing offering, something missing from the offering, is invalid. So the Gemara wants to know, why do I need two psukim? Right? Any pasuk Beis, pasuk Gimel, essentially teaching me the same thing, that if my mincha is missing anything, it becomes invalid. So, trei kroi bechaseros lamali. Why do I need two psukim to tell me that if I'm missing part of my mincha, it becomes invalid? So, lav chad lemincha shechaser kodem kmitza. There's two circumstances you could have a mincha that's invalid. That's why. You can have your mincha become missing part of it before you've done the kmitza, and then you could also have you can have part of your mincha offering go missing after you've done kmitza before you burn it. Obviously, once you've burned the kmitza, it becomes irrelevant because now you can even eat it. It's completely permissible. So those two stages. Now we have two psukim telling me I can't have my mincha be deficient. One is talking about each of those two stages. Therefore, utiyuvda de Rabbi Yochanan bitarvaihu. Therefore, this is going to refute Rabbi Yochanan in both of those circumstances. Remember, Rabbi Yochanan had said that if part of the kmitza is missing at either stage, right? So he says that that you're allowed to simply, if you're missing the kmitza before the kmitza, if you're missing from the mincha before the kmitza, you could simply bring from home and refill it. Doesn't invalidate it. And then we had the other circumstance we just had with Rabbi Yochanan, that once the kmitza is taken, if I'm missing any of the mincha, the kmitza can still be brought. So it seems like these two psukim seem to indicate Rabbi Yochanan is incorrect. So the Gemara says, no, it doesn't invalidate, doesn't go against Rabbi Yochanan Shita. Chad lemincha shechaser kodem kmitza, de'iv mevi mi beso v'malena. One is saying that if you're missing part of your mincha before you do the kmitza, it's invalid. What do you got to do? Bring some more from home and fix it. Right? So therefore, that's exactly what Rabbi Yochanan says. He says it's not invalid. He says you have to fix it. Well, the pasuk, when it says it's invalid, just means that if you don't fix it, it becomes invalid. So then, once you fill it from home, then it becomes fine. Ve'ilo, and if you don't lo, then it's not kosher. Chad l'shiraim, the other pasuk is l'shiraim shechaser ben kmitza l'aktarah. If you are missing part of your mincha after you've done the kmitza, that da'afagav demaktir kometz alehem, osan shirai masurim lachila, that even though the kmitza can still be brought, the rest of the mincha can no longer be consumed. And that Rabbi Yochanan agrees. The kmitza, once I've taken the kmitza out, the kmitza can still be brought. The rest of the offering, though, can't be eaten by anybody once it's missing. Okay, so di'i boilahu. Because we had the following question in the yeshiva. L'divrei ha'omer shiraim shechasru bein kmitza l'aktorah maktir kometz alein. According to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that if some of the leftover mincha offering after I've done kmitza is burned, right? Osan shiraim mahein ba'achila. What happens to the halacha with the rest of the offering? So can you eat the rest of the offering? Amar Zeir says, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, vehanoseres, the leftover, right? All of that leftovers can be consumed by the Kohen. Velo hanoseres min hanoseres. Not a remnant of the remnant, meaning if any of the mincha becomes missing, then it cannot be eaten. Rabbi Yanai says, minha mincha. He learns it from the pasuk. You have to be able to take from the mincha. Mincha shahai kfar. You need the complete mincha that you had before. So therefore, everyone agrees that if you're missing part of the offering, so then you can't eat the rest of the mincha, even if you can still burn the kmitza, and even if the offering is still valid, right, for the people who are bringing it. The rest of it can't be eaten by kohanim. Okay, now back to the next part of the Mishnah. The next part of the Mishnah says, Kamatz bismol. If you do Kmitza, you do the Kmitza process with your left hand, so that invalidates the Kmitza. It has to be done with the right hand. Minan immediately, where do I know that from? Amar Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera says, Damar Kro, because the pasuk says in Vayikra Tes, pasuk Yud Zayin, Vayakrev, as Hamincha v'yimalei kapo mimena. He's going to bring the mincha close, and he's going to fill his palm. Sorry, this is not the. This is talking about the what do you call it? The asham of the mitzorah. Okay, this is the asham of the mitzorah, that part of his offering, right? He has to bring a chatos, a bird chatos, and a bird olav. Well, it could be an animal, it could be a bird, depending on how wealthy he is. And then he has to bring in asham. Part of the asham we had discussed back in Zvachim is that, like, unlike other korbanos where you have to catch all the blood in a utensil, some of the blood gets caught into the hand of a second Kohen, and then we also had the oil, which is then poured out into the hand of the Kohen. That pasuk says he's going to bring the mincha, right? He's going to bring this oil. V'yamalei kapo mimena. He's going to fill his kaf, his palm with it. Kaf zeh ein yodea mahu. I don't know which palm. He's got two. Which palm do you use?
Right or left palm?
Right or left? That's the question. Keshu, those are your choices. Keshu Omer, when the pasuk says, "Velakacha kohen milog hashemen v'yatzak al kafa kohen hasmalis," the kohen is going to take from. 1 second. The first pasuk is talking about the kmitza. That pasuk is a chavtes. Yeah, no, I apologize. The pasuk vayakreva samincha vayimale kapo mimena, that he fills his hand with it. That's talking about the korbanos that they brought on the 8th day of the Yemei Miluim, of the inauguration of the Mishkan. Right? So therefore he's bringing the mincha, and he's supposed to take the palm of his hand, and he's going to do his kmitza with it. So we want to know which hand is he supposed to do his kmitza with. Doesn't tell us, right? So the answer is, now we compare that to Perak Yud Daled pasuk Tesvav. That's talking about the korban asham of the person who has tsaras. That one says you're going to take from the oil, and you're going to pour it on the palm of the left palm of the hand of the kohen, on his left palm. So that means to tell me kan smalis, that when it comes to the asham offering of the person who has tsaras, there he uses his left palm. Ha kol makom shedemar kaf. If it never specifies which palm, so then eno ela yamin, it has to be his right hand. It has to be his right hand, right? Because if it meant his left hand, it would have said left hand. We see that since it says left hand, we know it would be his left hand. It would have said so.
Maybe it means if it doesn't specify, it means it doesn't matter.
Oh, good question. Okay, there you go. See, that's what happens when Brian Schiffman's not here to ask the questions about what's coming up next in the Gemara. We get somebody else. Yes, understand the next question.
Hi, Brian 2.0. Hey, this is Brian 2.0, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm honored.
There we go. Peeps, always need somebody who understands the next line.
One step ahead.
One step ahead. So, but before we get there, right? Before we get there, though, the hami boile legufa, you can't learn anything from the pasuk where it says that you're supposed to use the left hand, because the pasuk is not meant to exclude anything else. It's just meant to teach me about itself, right? So, right, the pasuk just says that you're supposed to, specifically by the korban asham, pour it in your left hand, right? So we don't know whether to use the left hand or the right hand any other place. It just tells me here to use the left hand. So the answer is smalis achariniksiv. The word left is written a second time when you're talking about the korban asham of the mitzorah. It says a second one, right? In pasuk Tesvav later on, the whole pasuk says v'taval kohen etzba'o hayamanis min hashem. You're going to dip. The kohen's going to dip his right finger into the oil, asher al kapo asmalis, which is in his left hand. So he pours the oil into this hand, and he dips his finger into it like that.
I think you can use your left hand for anything.
Oh, good point. Except if the pasuk specifically says to use it, then we know. But the point is, well, if it only told me what to do with his left hand one time, so then that would be the rule by the korban asham. But if it tells me a second time, it's telling me not only is it the rule by the asham, but it's not the rule any other time.
Does it exclude like left-handed kohanim?
Yes, that's our issue, right? We were having conversation about whether a left-handed kohen could use his right hand in certain circumstances, and I'm not quite sure. It seems everybody says that's a problem, but I'm not exactly sure.
So probably historically were precluded from doing certain
parts of the service. Correct.
Say, well, you can't do that, but you can do.
You could do other. There are many other things, right? Organization-wise, taking up the the loaves, carrying
limbs.
parts, carrying limbs to the base. There are things that can be done. Now, ve'ema eina miut achar miut ela l'rabos. We have a principle of derivation, rules of derivation of rules. We call them hermeneutical principles, right? Hermeneutical principles is a fancy word. That means, what are the rules of how you derive one thing from another? One of them is that if the Torah tells us a specific thing twice, it means to expand it. How so? If the Torah said left hand one time, it would mean only your left hand. When it says left hand a second time, it means not just your left hand, other hands as well. Right? Why does it work? How does the Torah work that way? So this is even, by the way, if you look in the Yud Gimel Ikarim, the Yud Gimel Midos of Rabbi Shmuel, it's not there. Says the Mefarshim on that, because it's not really even a drasha. It's just like reading the pasuk, right? That's just how you read the psukim. And this the Torah wants to preclude you from making the mistake by writing it as an expansion one time. I might be able to find some sort of limiter. No, the Torah goes out of its way to say, here's a limit, and here's a second limit, which really means the expansion, right? It's almost like double negative, right? Negative times a negative is a positive. So therefore,
positive and negative.
Sorry, positive and negative is a negative.
Positive plus positive?
Positive plus positive. We're not plussing. We're, as far as multiplication is concerned, right? For the math teachers in the crowd. If you have a negative and a negative times a negative, you get a positive. So that's basically what this is. Miot b'achar miot is l'rabos. So therefore, the pasuk is telling me that even when it comes to the Korban Asham, not only is your left hand acceptable, but the right hand is also. So therefore, smolis achrin eksiv. There's a third time that it says the word left hand. It actually is going to say it 4 times total. Why? Because there's 2 different ways that a korban asham can be brought, as we said. One time, the pasuk is telling me that it can be brought with the left hand, and then a second time that talks about a rich person who has tsaras. He's using an animal for his korban asham. Then it goes through and repeats the whole process again with a person who has tsaras bringing birds. And it repeats mostly everything, and in that section, it repeats again, left hand, left hand. So we have a third time it says left hand. So the reason is to tell me that, kan smolis ve'ein achar smolis. The first time is to tell me that you need a left hand by korban asham. Second time is, it could be a riboy achar riboy, it could be a miut achar miut l'rabos. So therefore it has a third time to tell me that this circumstance needs to be done with the left hand. And not only that, no other time requires the left. You have the left hand. However, right, that means that, as we said, that only could mean that this is the only time you must use the left hand. Other times, you might be able to use the left hand if you want, or use the right hand. It doesn't matter. Ve'ima adarabba, ma kan smolis af bi alma smolis nami. Why don't we learn then that here the left hand can be used? So also, in general, right? You can also use the left hand. So therefore, arba smolis, there's a 4th time the word left is written, and that is ksivi trei be'ani trei be'osh, because it says it twice by the rich person who has tzaras, twice by the poor person who has tzaras, and therefore from all of the circumstances, from all of those, we basically are going to come out with the rule that by the mitzorah, you must use the left hand, right? But in other circumstances, you may definitely not use the right hand. You may definitely not use the left hand. This is the rule here, but in no other place, right? Because if we were saying that you could use even the left hand, so 3 times would have been enough. The 4th time tells me, no, specifically this is the circumstance that you could use the left hand and must use the left hand. So not only can you use the left hand by the tzaras case, you must use the left hand by tzaras, and not only is the right hand supposed to be used by the other korbanos, but you may not use the left hand by the other korbanos.
Does this mean why you're allowed to use the left hand only for Torah?
Well, what winds up coming up is that the kohen winds up using both of his hands, right? He's using part of putting the oil in this hand, and then he's got to dip his finger into it, and he's got to do the sprinklings that way. So his left hand is the only hand that he really has available. But the other reason why we're mentioning it here is specifically to tell us not to use that when it comes to kmitza. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Zera. So Rabbi Yirmiyah says to Rabbi Zera, Al boen yodo hayemonis. Later the psukim say that the application of this oil and the blood, incidentally, goes on the thumb of his right hand, Al boen raglo hayemonis, and his big toe of his right foot. Dichsiv, because the pasuk says, b'shemen dimitzora, that's what it says, by the oil of the person who has tsaras. Right? Now, the question is, lamali, why do I need that? Because after all, at the end of the day, it said that I'm supposed to put the blood of the asham on his ear, right hand, and right toe. And then it says that I'm supposed to put the oil where I put that blood. And then it says also on the right hand and the left. Why do you have to tell me where that was? I already know where the blood was. Once you tell me that the oil goes where the blood was, I know which hand to put it on. So the answer is chad lahachshir tzadin v'chad lifsol tzidei tzadin. One time it tells me to put the oil on is to tell me, even though I'm supposed to put it on the place, on the location of where the blood was, I don't have to put it on the back, on the finger itself precisely. I can even put it on the side of the finger a little bit. That's also okay. And then it tells me a second time it has to be on the finger in order to tell me that not only can I put it on the side, but I cannot put it on the bottom of the finger. It's supposed to be on the top, can be on the side, cannot be on the bottom, right? That's where the application is. Now, the Gemara wants to know, al dam ha'asham, al makom dam ha'asham, lemay osu. Okay, so now, if I understand that we're going to be telling me to put the oil why it tells me to place the oil twice. One time telling me where to place the oil, one time telling me where not to place the oil, but I still already know that it's supposed to go where the blood of the asham is. And then it tells us to put the blood place on the place of the blood of the asham. So hani trichi, I need those because the ikas of Rachman of the pasuk said al dam ha'asham. You're supposed to place it on the blood of the asham. Havamin, I might have made the false conclusion that isay in niskaneach lo. The blood has to literally be there. And you have to put the oil on top of the blood, which is still physically present. If the blood has been washed off, right, for some reason it's been wiped off, then I couldn't put the oil. So Kasav Rachmana, that's what the Torah says, al makom, it has to be on the location where the blood at one point was. The blood is not the blood's physical presence is not required. Not only that, but I might have expected the other way. Ikas of Rachmana al makom, if it tells me I'm supposed to put it on the place where the blood was, then maybe I might have thought not to put it on the blood itself, but on the place where the blood was. Maybe you wipe it off. Maybe you put it near it. Havamina, I might have thought davka niskanach, you're supposed to wipe the blood off so that you could apply the oil directly. Why? Because aval, isay, if the blood was there, e mahavi chatzitza, it might be a chatzitza, right? It would be an interruption between the skin and the oil that you're putting, kamash malan al dam ha'asham, therefore the pasuk says on the blood of the asham, meaning you can do it whether the blood is there or not there. Incidentally, right, we had learned that when it comes to the menachos, we can sometimes come back and bring that oil days later. Right? It doesn't have to be done on the same day as the rest of the korbanos are brought. So therefore, the blood, it makes good sense that if this person has done the blood of his asham already, and then he went home, and then he came back a couple days later in order to apply the oil, the blood might not still be there. Interestingly, that if you look at the psukim where it says one says you're supposed to put it on the blood of the asham, and the other one says on the location of the blood of the asham, then where it says on the location of the blood of the asham is talking about the poor person who had saras, in which case he's bringing a bird. Why does that make a difference? Because why would you not bring the oil on the same day? You're there, you're up in line, it's your turn. May as well hand everything and take care of it already. Why wouldn't you? Maybe you didn't have enough money. Maybe he's the poor guy and all he's got is the birds, and he's got to save up a little bit and come back and do the oil later. Therefore, when it's talking about the poor person who has tsaras, it tells us, yeah, but you don't need to do it on the same day that you've got the blood there. You can go home, get oil later, and then come back and do it again later. And it can only has to be done at the same location.
Almost if it's pouring rain. Right?
Pouring rain might be another circumstance where it will make a difference.
Right, yeah.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So it's telling you, like, don't worry, like, everything is kosher, even though
Wasn't there.
it wasn't there, like, still do the oil.
So now Rava says, but I still now have my last point. I understand that I've got that you're supposed to apply the oil or the blood. I'm supposed to apply the blood. I understand why it tells me to apply the blood twice, because it's telling me the location, just the side, not the bottom. I understand why it tells me to apply the oil twice, because it's telling me that I have to apply the oil either on the blood or even if the blood's not there. But Rava says, Me'achar dechsiv al dam ha'asham, once the pasuk is telling me that I'm supposed to apply the oil onto the blood, al makom dam ha'asham, and on the location where the blood was, uksiva yemanis bedam, and I already know the blood is on the right hand, Al boen yodo yamanis valboen raglo yamanis tichsivi b'shemen demitzora ashir ve'ani lamali. Why does it then have to tell me again to put the oil on the right foot and the right hand if I already know I'm putting it wherever the oil was, wherever the blood was? Elo amar Rava. So Rava says, and this Gemara we've had before, familiar. Rava says that's not why it says the word yad and it says the word regel and the word ozen and ear here. It's not to tell me the location that you're supposed to apply the oil. I already figured out where you're supposed to put the oil. It says put the oil where the blood was. I get that. Why do we go out of our way to mention the hand? Is because it's a drasha. Yad likimitza. There's a gzera shava that's learned here. Here by the Metzora it says that you're supposed to apply it on the hand of the person who has tzaras, and it says by the kmitza you're supposed to use your hand to do the kmitza. Just like the hand that's having the blood applied to it and the oil applied to it is your right hand, so two kmitza has to be done with the right hand. And regel, we have another gzira shava. Just like the leg, the foot of the person who's getting the blood and the oil application is the right foot, so too lechalitza. So too the person, when you have to do chalitza, right, that is where a person dies without children, so his brother has an obligation to either do yibum, to marry his brother's wife, or to divorce her through a chalitza ceremony, which includes the removal of his shoe. His shoe has to be removed from his right foot. Right? And ozen, his ears also has to be, like just as the Metzora has to have the blood and the oil applied to his right ear, so too the ozen, the ear, where do we also see ears? By the Eved Ivri. The Eved Ivri, he's a slave and he doesn't want to leave his master, so he has to put his ear up against the wall and they have to pierce his ear. Which ear? The Ritzia. He has to do his right ear in that process to be done with the right ear. So therefore, that's why these are written, in order to tell me that these rules apply in other circumstances. So that's another source for where, according to Rava, that's Rava's source for where the kmitza has to be done with the right hand. Okay, smalis lemai asa. So if that's the case, according to Rava, he's got his drasha, so then what does he use the left hand rules for, right? We've got 4 times that it uses the left hand. According to the other first opinion, that was why we do the right hand by the kmitza, because it says left hand 4 times. But according to him, it says no, it's because it says yad, it's because it says the hand. So why does he have the left hand? So I'm Rav Shisha Breder Rav Edi, Rav Shisha Breder, the son of Rav Edi, says, Lifsol yamin de kohen bimitzora, in order to tell us that the right hand of the kohen who's doing the service for the person who has tzaras is invalid. Shalot tomar. You might have thought, despite the fact that it says left hand, and it says it again, and it says it again, ma b'makom shalot nisraba small nisraba yamin. Under most circumstances, you can't use your left hand, but you can use your right hand. B'makom nisraba small, dinch nisraba yamin. When you can use your left hand, for sure you can use your right hand, right? It's just more lenient. So therefore, the idach smalis yad v'regel yamanis ani l'mayalsa. Problem is that we went through the list. And we had number 1, we had left written several times. One of the times was to tell me, no, it must be the left hand, cannot be the right hand. What do you do with that time that it says left hand? Why does it have to say left hand again and again and again? One of the times it said left hand was to tell me means the left hand, not the right hand. So what's the point of that? So the answer is, Legetana debe Rabbi Yishmael. He uses the pasuk in accordance with the way that they learned in Yeshiva Rabbi Yishmael. Kol parsha shenamar v'nishnes. Whenever a parsha in the Torah, you say, haven't I read this before? It looks very similar to, like, we've had these rules before. Why does the Torah go through the whole thing all over again? Because there's a rule. Whenever a parsha is repeated, and one rule is slightly different, lo nishnis ela bishvil davar shenischadesh ba, that's okay. The Torah will go through an entire thing in order to show you the distinction clearly between this circumstance and the other circumstance. When it comes to the asham, it can be brought by a rich person, it can be brought by a poor person. And the distinction between the two is that a rich person brings animals for his korban ola and chatos, and a poor person brings birds. Other than that, there's no distinction, and the Torah will repeat everything through, and it doesn't mean to teach you anything extra. Right? It's not coming to tell me specifically my right hand and not my left. Therefore, he learns right hand and not left, right? From this other drasha. Okay, Amar Rabba Bar Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. So Rabbi Chana says the name Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Kol makom shenemra etzba ukahuna eino el yamin. This is a Gemara we've had before as well. This hopefully sounds familiar from Zvachim Chaf Dalid Chaf Hey, and this is lifted word for word, right? So whenever the Torah says he's going to give his another opinion as to where we know that you're supposed to use your right hand. Whenever he says the rule is whenever the Torah uses the word finger, or the word Kohen, it means right hand, right? Because, right, we're going to see why. You might have thought that what he means is etzba ukehuna ba'inon. You have to write both, right? The pasuk has to write finger and Kohen. For example, we find that when it's talking about the Korban Chatos. By the Korban Chatos, it says, V'lakacha Kohen midama chatos be'etzba'o. The Kohen takes from the blood of the Chatos with his finger, right? And he makes his blood applications with his finger. So, then it says there, it has to be done. So therefore, since it says Kohen with his finger, it means right hand. Gamar mimitzora. Right, but we're going to learn from there from a gzer shava from the person who has tzaras, where it says dichsiv. The pasuk says v'taval hakohen as etzba'o hayemanis. The kohen is going to dip his finger, his right finger. Right, that's in the oil that's in his left hand. So you see that when it says finger and kohen, it has to be right hand from tzaras. Therefore, finger and kohen is necessary in order to teach me that it has to be right hand by the korban chatos. Okay, so I might have thought, I need both the words finger and Kohen. Hare Kemitza, but if I take a look at the psukim that are talking about Kemitza, Delo Ksiva ba Ela Kehuna, it doesn't say the word etzba. There's no finger in Kemitza. It's his whole hand. What does it say? It says the Kohen. Because the pasuk says, the Ve'ivia El Kohen, he's going to bring it to the Kohen, the Kamatza Kohen Mimena Melo Kumso, and the Kohen's going to do the Kemitza. And in fact, it says the Kohen, that should be enough. He says, this is tell me, that it means that he's going to use his right hand for the Kemitza. Utnan, we learned in a Mishnah, kamatz bismol pasol, that if you use your left hand, it's pasol, which means you need to use your right hand. But how can we say to use your right hand? It never says the word etzba, never says the word finger. So Amar Rava, so Rava then therefore concludes that o etzba o kahuna. If the pasuk says etzba or kahuna, not both, it means the right hand. Amar le Abaye, so Abaye says to Rava, yeah, but hari holachas evarim lekevesh. I'll show you a circumstance where the left hand is permissible. And it says the word Kohen. For example, part of the Korban Tamid service is that they're going to take, or the Korban knows that they're going to take all of the parts of the animal and they're going to walk it up the ramp. Right? And it says there, Dichsiv behu kehuna, it says by the sacrificing of those limbs that you need the Kohen to do it. Dichsiv, as the pasuk says, V'kriv ha-Kohen es ha-kol, the Kohen is going to bring it all close. V'ktir mizbecha, and burn it on the mizbeach. Ve'omar mar, and it says about that, Zu holochas evarim lekevesh. This is talking about bringing the limbs to the ramp. And Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah in Meseches Tamid that says, Haregel, how did the Kohanim carry? One of the Kohanim was carrying Haregel Shel Yamin, Biyad Smol, Ubeis Ora Lachutz. He was carrying something in his right hand already, so I think he's carrying the head of the animal in his right hand, if I'm not sure.
Was it dripping at all from blood?
It might be, and for that reason, we're going to see that he's going to hold it so that the location where the meat was cut, is facing him, so that it's not outwardly.
The blood would be dripping on him instead of.
Well, yeah, we don't want the blood dripping on him necessarily, but we definitely want it not to be the part of the meat to be where the cut was to be exposed, right? It's nicer looking that way. Mm-hmm. So the leg of the front right leg is in the Kohen's left hand, but you see the left hand is acceptable. Right? Base ora chutz, the skin is on the outside, right? He's holding it towards him, like he's holding the leg so that the joint is facing him. So there you see that it says the word Kohen, but the left hand is acceptable. So how are we going to learn this? Ki amrinon o etzba o kehuna bidvar hama'akev kapara. The answer is, yes. Whenever the Torah uses the word Kohen or finger, so that it means right, only if we're talking about a service which is essential for doing the service, for the service to be done, right? Carrying the limbs, burning the limbs, we always have said is part of the service, but it's not an essential part of the service. If you don't do that, let's say the limbs become invalidated, once the blood is thrown, the offering is acceptable. You don't have to do that part. So that part, the fact that it says a Kohen has to do it, doesn't mean that it has to be done with the right hand. Okay, v'harei kabbalah. Fine, if that's what you're saying is true. Let's take a look at the psukim that talk about catching the blood of the animal. That we know has to be done with the right hand. Davar ma'akev kaparahu. It is a service, which if you don't do that part of the service, it's going to ruin the korban. Kasav ba'kehuna. It says the word kohen. Dichsev, as the pasuk says, ve'ikrivu b'nei Aaron kohanim es hadam. The kohanim are going to bring the blood close. Zu kabbalas hadam. This pasuk is talking about catching the blood. Kibel biad smol pasal. That you're supposed to, if you catch the blood with your left hand, it's invalid. However, Rabbi Shimon machshir. Rabbi Shimon says it's okay with the left hand. How can Rabbi Shimon say it's okay with the left hand if at the end of the day it says the word Kohen? So the answer is, Rabbi Shimon kamart. What's your question? Your question is, well, how does Rabbi Shimon learn it? Rabbi Shimon, tarti boy. Rabbi Shimon is different. Rabbi Shimon requires the word etzba and the word Kohen. Nobody else does. That's the argument. Everybody else says it says Kohen, so it means that he has to use the right hand. But since it only uses the word Kohen, the only word it says is Kohen, but not etzba, so that's where Rabbi Shimon says it doesn't need the left hand. It doesn't need the right hand. It can be even done with the left hand. Omi boy, Rabbi Shimon tarti. Does Rabbi Shimon really require that you have the word etzba and Kohen? After all, Vatanya, we learn a brayso. Rabbi Shimon says, "Kol makom shenemar bo yad." Anytime in the pasuk where it says the hand, you're supposed to use your hand. Eina ela yamin, it means the right hand. Etzba eina ela yamin, and every time it says the word finger, it means the right finger. So etzba lo bo. So therefore, we see it says all he needs is the word etzba. Doesn't need the word Kohen, right? Doesn't mean that. So therefore, okay, so how are we going to learn Rabbi Shimon? So the answer is etzba lo boi kahuna boi etzba. The way we have to learn it is that whenever the word etzba is written, he says it means the right hand. That's true. But whenever it says the word Kohen, you still need to write the word etzba, right? Kohen doesn't by itself mean right hand. Kohen has to be written with the word etzba. Problem is, if you need the word etzba anyway, ela Kohen lamali, why do you need the word Kohen? Right? The word Kohen doesn't teach me by itself, right? Etzba teaches me by itself. So just write the word etzba. Don't write the word Kohen. It teaches me nothing. So the answer is bekihuno. When it uses the word Kohen, it means that that the Kohen needs to be wearing his special garments to perform the service, right? That's what the word Kohen means. Farei zrika. What about throwing of the blood? Delo ksiv be ella kehuna. It doesn't say that it has to be done with the right with his yad or his etzba. It just says kahuna, and so therefore bismol pasul utnan. And we learned in a Mishnah zorak bismol pasul. If he throws it with his left hand, it's pasul v'lo polig Rabbi Shimon. We would expect Rabbi Shimon to argue there because it only says Kohen. He should argue and say you could use zrika with your left hand. So Amar Abaye. Polig bebrisa, you're right. He doesn't argue there, but he does in fact argue in a brisa. The Mishnah doesn't quote him, but he does in fact argue. He's consistent. Titania, we're in a brisa. Kibel biyad small bismol. If he catches the blood with his left hand pasul, then it invalidates. For Rabbi Shimon machshir, Rabbi Shimon says it's okay. Zorak bismol pasul. If he does zrika with his left hand, it is invalid. For Rabbi Shimon machshir, Rabbi Shimon says it's kosher. He's consistent. Okay, fine. Let's go back over this issue. That when it uses the word kehuna, it means that according to the Chachamim, right, who we said before, as soon as it has the word Kohen, not according to Rabbi Shimon, but according to the Chachamim, it means it has to be done with the right hand. How are you going to explain what Rava says, right? That how do I know that you're supposed to that yad likamitza? The source for doing kamitza with your right hand is the gzeira shava that we learned yad from the korban asham of the person who had tzaras. We don't need that because by kamitza it says the word Kohen. So that means you need a right hand. I don't need a gzeira shava. So therefore, lekamitza lamalu, why do I use yad? Mikahuna nafka. I should learn it from the word kahuna. So the answer is chad lekometz v'chad lekiddush kamitz, because there's two parts of the service. Part one of the service is I have to do the kamitza. Part two of the service of the kamitza is I take the kamitza and I put it into a utensil. Therefore, both of those services require the right hand. So therefore, there's two sources for right hand. One from the fact that it says kahuna, and then it also says yad. Now, le Rabbi Shimon de lo boy kiddush kometz, right? So Rabbi Shimon, he doesn't require you to put any of the. He doesn't require you to put the what do you call it? To put the kamitza into a utensil. He doesn't require that part of the service at all. Uleman Damar, and also according to Uleman Damar Nami de boy kiddush kometz le Rabbi Shimon, even according to the person who holds that you do need to do that. Kiddush comments into, according to Rabbi Shimon, bismol achshuri machshir. He says you can do it with your left hand. Right? He says it's okay with the left hand, like you do sarika with your left hand, like you do Kabbalah with your left hand. So yad de Rava Lomali. What is Rabbi Shimon using this gzeira shav of yad for? Ila kamitza gufa. If you're going to tell me it's for the kamitza, aliba de Rabbi Shimon. So according to Rabbi Shimon, that would see that Rabbi Shimon's telling us that you're supposed to do the kamitza with your right hand. Mi de Rabbi Yehuda braid de Rabbi Chia nafka, that he doesn't need it for that because he would learn that from the drasha of Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Chia. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda Braid Rabbi Chia, as Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Chia said, my time of the Rabbi Shimon. What is the reason why Rabbi Shimon says that you can do the kemitza with or without the utensil? Because Damakra, because the pasuk says, Kodesh Kodashim hi kachatas ka'asham. The kemitza is holy of holies. It's like a sin offering or an asham offering. So now, why are you comparing it to two things? Why are you comparing the mincha to a chatos or an asham? Ba la'ovda biyad. If you do it with the hand, you put the kemitza into a service utensil, ovda biyamin. Then you got to do it with your right hand, kachatas, like you would do a sin offering. Sin offering says very specifically etzba, right? It says kohen, so it's definitely got to be the right hand. Ba la'ovda bakli. But if you're going to put it into a service utensil, ovda bismol, then you can do it with your left hand, ke'asham, just like the asham of the person who's tzaras, can be done with the left hand. So you really have your choices, right? If you do it by hand, you got to follow a hand service. Hand service is with the left hand. If you want to use a utensil, then you got to use utensil service, then you got to use your right hand.
As long as wax on, wax off.
But the point is that he does not use the word yad yad, the gzera shava, to teach me right hand. He uses kachatas to teach me right. So therefore, what does he use this yad yad gzera shava for? So lo nitzricha el lekometz de minchas chote. The answer is he uses this gzera shava, right, for the circumstance of doing kemitza on the specific type of mincha, the minchas chote, which was just flour. That its kemitza has to be done with the right hand. Okay, well, if you know that you have to do kemitza with the right hand of every offering, why would you think that the kemitza of this minchas chote would not? Because salkadai techamina, I might have thought that whole the Amar Rabbi Shimon is the one who rules. Shaloye korbanal mehudar, that you're not supposed to put oil or frankincense on this offering. Why? Because we don't want it to be nice. So therefore, ki kamitz nami bismol tiskasher. He might have said, you know what else can make it not nice? Use your left hand for the kemitza. Therefore, kamash malan, therefore he's coming to tell me, no, yad yad, you must use your right hand, cannot use your left hand, even if it would make the offering look not as good. Okay, kamatz ve'ola biyadot tzror. The next thing the Mishnah says, he does the kemitza, and in the kemitza comes up a rock, or a piece of salt, or the frankincense, so then it becomes no good, right? Then it becomes puzzle, it's no good. Why? Because it becomes a kometz, it becomes a kemitza chaser, it becomes a kemitza that's missing a part. Kol hani lamali. Why do you have to give me all the examples? Right? I mean, I get it, right? If anything's in it, then it's invalid. You give me all the examples. So tzrich, I need it because the itan it's if you told me about a rock, mishom delav bas hakravi. The rock is not part of the service. That's a completely separate foreign entity. But the salt is part of the sacrifice. I might say it's acceptable. If you told me the salt isn't acceptable, that's because the salt's not supposed to be in the utensil yet. The utensil is supposed to have the flour, it's supposed to have the oil, it's supposed to have the frankincense, it's not supposed to have the salt until later, the kemitza. But if some salt got in,
if the salt gets in, does it make it invalid? Or?
If the salt gets into the kemitza, it makes the kemitza invalid, yes. Because it becomes a missing kemitza. So therefore, however, of lavona, but the frankincense, this is already supposed to be here. The mincha, the lavona, the frankincense is supposed to be here. Imatis kasher, I would think that if some of that frankincense got into my kemitza, it shouldn't invalidate it. Kamash Malon tells me, no, all of those. And basically this is if you told me frankincense, I know the other ones. The Mishnah does follow this lozu av, this tells me not only this, but also another circumstance. And even though if it had told me frankincense, I probably know the other ones. Mishnayos do this thing where it goes in steps. This circumstance is invalid. And then not only that, but this one is also invalid. And not only that, this one is invalid. Yes, it would be true that if it told me frankincense is invalid, I don't need the rest of them. But that the Mishnah will escalate the cases. Now, we said the reason why you can't have any salt in your hand or the rock is because having extra in your kemitza or less than in your kemitza is going to invalidate it. My area mishum chaser v'yaser. Gemara wants to know, why does that have to be the reason why it's invalid? There's a better reason why it's invalid. Mishum chatzitza. You have a chatzitza. There's a piece of salt between your finger and holding the the crumbs of the bread which are in your hand.
But what if the salt is within pile?
I was wondering that too, right? In other words, it's not. You don't want it. It doesn't. But it would seem that your nothing can intersperse between any. Another, I guess, it seems to be, and nothing should be in the way. right? So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Minatzad. What if the salt is on the side, right? What if the salt is at the edge and it's not really in between? So maybe that also could be a circumstance, right? He says, nevertheless, right? Even if it is on the outside and it's not in the way of your fingers, nevertheless, it's going to invalidate it because now you've removed where some more of the bread could have been, and your kmitza is now less than. Amalei Abaye Rava. Abaye asks Rava, Ketzad komtzin? So he says, how do you do kmitza? Amalei, so he answers, Kamtzi inshi. Like people make a scoop, right? They basically scoop up there with their hands, right? So he says, Eisvei. So he asks him a question. He says, what do you mean you can't use all of your fingers? Because the pasuk says, Zu, this little piggy, right? Play with this little piggy. Zu, this finger is your zeres. This is the zeres. Why do we call it the zeres? Because when we measure the choshen, it's the distance, the choshen, the breastplate of the coin was from the pinky to the thumb. This wide, this long. Zeres arko, zeres rakpo. That is the distance. That's why it's called a zeres, because it measures the distance called a zeres, a hand span. Okay. Then we get to this little piggy is called the kmitza, zu kmitza. That's your kmitza finger. Zu amma, this is called your amma because then from your elbow to here is an amma, right? This is your etzba. This is called the finger. This is the etzba. This is the one we use to dip the blood in when it says, the Torah says, you're supposed to use your etzba to flick the blood, to apply the blood. This is your etzba, and this is your godel. This is your godel, which the Torah calls your bohen, which we use for the tzras. So each finger has its purpose, okay? Now, therefore, this is your kmitza. Why is this called your kmitza? Because you're only doing kmitza with up to these 3 fingers. You said to scoop it up like people scoop, but it's not true. You're using these fingers. Ella, so therefore, he says, what Rava's answer is lahashvos. What you're using, you need all your fingers in order to smooth the measurement. Right? I scoop up like this. I might have some on the outside here. I got to take my pinky and I got to wipe off the edge. Right? That's what that finger's. All my fingers are necessary. I need my thumb on this side and I need my finger on this side in order to make clean so that nothing's sticking out because I can't have it extra. No, yes, sir. Can't have extras. Okay? So, Hechi Ovid. So he says, how does the Kohen do this? Amar Rav Zutra bar Tuvia Amar Rav. Rav Zutra, the son of Tuvia, says in the name of Rav, Chofa shalosh etzbaos ad shemagia al pas yado. He bends his fingers over until they come down to the bottom of the palm of his hand. And he does the Kohen, that's how he does his kmitza. Right? Tanya nami hachi. We have a brisa that supports that as well. Melo kumtso, you're supposed to take the full of your kmitza. Yachol mivoratz. Right? So you might think that what you're just supposed to do is you're supposed to take it, scooping up, getting it between your fingers. Therefore it says bekumtso. Right, that you're not supposed to. You might have the extras in between your fingers. Would be no. Malokum. So only what's inside the kometz itself is acceptable. That's what you're supposed to use. I bekumso. If it told me to use the kometz yachol baroshe etzbaosav, I might think that you do the kmitza right. I could use the ends of my fingers, as he's saying. I might do the kmitza like this, meaning my fingers fold down just halfway, like this. I might think I could do that, like this. So therefore, the Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, milokum, so it has to be a full kmitza all the way down to the palm, right? Not like this. That's why I was wondering why we described in the art scroll picture, right? It says the kmitza that's missing. It still has a picture of him like this.
Right,
so why don't they use this picture? It seems like the Gemara's example is this, right? So I would have, if I was writing the picture. I'm sure they have a reason. But
you need your art scroll.
So which is it? Is it all the way or?
It has to be all the way down. This is just a kometz, right? This is melo kumtzo. This is your full kmitza. This is the full thing.
Before you do the avoda, as a kohen, you gotta have like a 2-week workshop.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's correct.
You're not coin.
That's correct. And then they only worked a couple weeks a year, and on Yom Tov, so they must have had refresher courses, right?
Miluim.
That's correct. They had to come back and do remember everybody, this is how you do the kmitza. Does everybody practice your kmitza? Everybody, this is what a sheep looks like, because we can confuse sheep and goats. It's right. This is what they look like. Okay.
Well, by the time the end of the Beit Sheni, nobody knew anything.
Yeah.
Right?
People
So
were very.
They should have this stickers. Hi, my name is blank.
Yeah.
Of course, we couldn't wear that, Yehuda, because it would be against the big day kahuna. Can't wear the stickers.
That's a good point.
Okay, so now, ketzad, how do you do it? Chofesh shalosh etzbos al pas yado, right? He's going to fold his 3 fingers over the palm of his hand. Then it says v'kometz, and then he does his kmitza b'machvas u'b'marcheshes. When it comes to the machvas and the marcheshes, so those offerings are. The bread is already baked, right, or cooked, or whatever it is, as we saw, and you've crumbled it up. So you've got crumbly pieces of bread, and you're doing the kmitza with these crumbly pieces of bread, so you might have pieces sticking out the sides. So mochek bigodlo milmalo besbo katana milmata, you're going to smoothen out the top with the thumb and smoothen out the bottom with your pinky in order to make sure you have no pieces of bread sticking out the sides. Okay, and zuhi avoda kasher shabaminish. If this hurts your fingers, then you're doing it right. It is it is a difficult service in the Beis Hamikdash. This is a difficult service.
I think this was fine flour.
No, that's a common issue, right? If you take a look back in the back of your art scroll, right, you will see that in the service offering of many of these, right, it depends on what kind of offering, right? Most of these, preparing these mincha offerings, they were cooked, they were made, the loaves are crumbled after they are already made, and then they are placed into the utensil, and then the kmitza is performed on some of these after they're already scalded, baked, and made up, and then they're crumbled. Here's your kmitza that we were discussing, right? And you are actually scooping up from the bread after it's already been baked and cooked. Now, some of these, right, we've got some of these minchas chote, right, there's no flour, then you're scooping up the flour. Those could be different, they are going to work differently. But many of these, the machvas, the marcheshes, are actually, the bread is already baked, or not baked, or whatever, fried it is, right. Pan fried or deep dish fried or whatever it is, those are already done, so you have it scooped up. Okay, so now, this is familiar. We've had this before. Vitulo. That's the most difficult service in the Beis Hamikdash. We've got other difficult services. V'ha'ika malika. Remember we talked about malika. Malika we called a difficult service because you're holding a bird with your fingers here and then the wings, and then you're turning the head around the back. And according to one opinion, you're doing it in your left hand, and then you're doing it. Another opinion is you're actually holding the bird in your right hand and doing the malika with the thumb all in one hand.
It's like you're suffocating it.
Not suffocating. You're going to be breaking its neck and things, but it is very difficult, right? Mm-hmm. Also, chafina, the big one is the chafina. Chafina is that you've got 2 fistfuls. Somehow you've got 2 fistfuls. You got to scoop up from Ketores on Yom Kippur, and you have to do 2 fistfuls like this, right? And now I've got it exactly. I've got the exact right amount. Then I've got to get this pour it into a utensil where I put it in. That's no problem. Now I've got the utensil. I've got. I've got in my other hand, my right hand, I'm going to carry hot coals. My left hand, I'm going to carry this ladle full of incense. I go into the Kodesh Kodashim, put the ladle with the coals down, and now somehow I've got to empty the spices from this ladle into my 2 hands. So how are you supposed to empty it? Well, that's really difficult. Either you can use your fingertips. Can't use gloves, Yehuda, right? Remember, I'm going to use my fingertips. And you can't spill any, or I use my teeth. Yeah, so use your teeth. So it's hard. Okay?
Heavy kids, these are not like...
Yeah, and this is difficult. So, okay, so you're telling me that that kmitza is so hard. Here are some other ones, these are hard. Mm-hmm. So the answer is, Elo, what we mean is, Hi achas me'avodos kasha shabingus. This is one of the difficult services. We have a few difficult services. Okay, we can stop here as it's 9:30. And we'll continue Amar of Papa. We are going to discuss exactly